We are here with one of my favorite people that I have met in the last 6 months. His name, I call him KP, but he's also known as Karthik Puvvada. And he is a person who has changed my entire business concept and blown my mind. And that's why we have him here today. But KP, I'm going to brag on you a little bit. So KP has so many skills. One of them is he's a five-time founder. He also is someone who has bootstrapped many startups and helped other startups to grow their companies. And that's why we're working together right now. And what he is up to at this very moment is he is head of community for a company called Netlify. And we're going to have you talk a little bit more about that, KP. And we're going to be talking about all kinds of things. We're going to be talking about AI. We're going to talk about founder-led sales. We're going to be talking about modern day go-to-market, which are all so critical when you're growing a company. So let's dive in.
So the number one mistake that I see in the founder-led sales motion um, is the founder being too eager to replace themselves um, in sales calls, in sales conversations, and it just, overall sales as a function, right? I think especially in the world, in the spheres and worlds that I'm part of, where in AI and product and tech, a lot of founders are, you know, very much product driven, which is an asset, but also they they just think like, oh, I'm just gonna hire somebody to do sales for me, right? And they jump the gun too quickly, and they think they can just simply, just focus on engineering and product and improvements just on the product side, and the sales guy is going to go close the deals for them and sort of evangelize to the market and so on. But the challenge there, though, Midori, is that they the sales is not just about revenue, right? Revenue is obviously the big part of it, big focus, but sales is so much more than revenue. It's also learning, right? It's product feedback. So when you go out there, when you're doing all these conversations and calls, intro calls, demo calls, when you're prospecting, you're going to learn a ton about what kind of ICP, right, is resonating with the value prop you have, right? And at what point in the sales conversation are their eyes being lighting up, right? Or where do they like make a face and they're, is seemingly indicating to you that that's an objection, and then so you kind of learn a lot. That's way more than just revenue figures on a Stripe dashboard, and you bring that knowledge and insight, the intel, back to the product, and then you say, here's the areas in which I want to iterate on. Here's the use case that's resonating. Here's the use case that I think is great, but maybe it's a commodity in our vertical, and everyone has got that. Maybe that's not the way we differentiate. So there's so much intel that you can only collect by being in the field, which is doing these jumping on sales calls, right? So I think the number one mistake is to simply delegate this too quickly before you've done enough iterations and cycles, because product and sales have to work in tandem, at least in the first year to achieve this sort of a product market fit. And I think that's my biggest advice to founders: to do not try to delegate too early, as much as possible, even if it's uncomfortable. Especially a lot of the technical minded founders, it's very uncomfortable with going on these like sales calls and getting rejected. But that is the price you pay for the intel and the insights you're going to unlock in your market category.
I see the same thing, KP. Regardless of the field, founders often are so scared of sales, and that's the first thing they want to offset to someone
Yes.
else. They feel like someone else can do it better. But just like you mentioned, the key to doing sales yourself is no one's going to care more than you.
Yes.
Number two, that when you are doing the sales yourself, you're catching those things, you're catching those little nuances, and you can figure out how to tweak your tool, how to tweak your service,
Yes.
how to improve that you can't do unless you're calling it. And one of the rules of thumb that I always recommend for all of my clients is you need to do at least the first 25.
Yeah.
You need to you need to be the front person for sales for the first 25 before you even consider
Yeah.
hiring a salesperson.
Yeah.
and make sure that you have the flow correct. Now, that's not to say you shouldn't hire an advisor to
Right.
help you with your sales process,
Right.
but I completely agree with you that founder-led sales is so critical.
In fact, I would definitely recommend that you hire an advisor just so that you have a sparring partner, right? And in whatever capacity, whether it's part-time or just a few hours a month, but you have a sparring partner, you have a soundboard, you can bounce your ideas off of them. You can kind of run some sales scripts off of them and show your, if you have a sales script or if you have like, if you notice some patterns, you can run, kind of dissect the patterns, sales conversations patterns with that person. So it's good to have some kind of a third party, as an advisor or as a consultant for sure. But back to what we were saying, I think a lot of the initial days, which is the first 25, the first 50 calls, they're huge learning unlocks. And I think you should definitely go through that yourself. And I'll also add one more thing, which I didn't touch in the first piece, which is the ICP, the prospects, right? Your potential customers, they can sense whether you truly care about the problem you're trying to solve or not. And there's a great line by, in the Founders podcast, which, is funny because it's ironic because I'm wearing the hat. That's a merch from that podcast. David Sender talks about, on this like iconic episode with Nike, Phil Knight. He never saw himself as a sales guy, and apparently he's like always like, I don't think I'm a great sales guy, and I couldn't even sell encyclopedias. How could I sell shoes? But there's a page in his autobiography, where he talks about how he was stunned that people were buying all these like Nike shoes off of his, at the back of his car because he was selling them on the races. And there is a line where he reflects to himself and says, people were not buying the shoes. They were buying my belief in running. So because he was a runner himself, all these initial customers he would find and sell to or persuade um, were other runners, long distance runners on these weekends. And they just wanted, someone who cared about the problem of long distance runners the way that they would care about, which is Phil Knight himself, because he was a runner. And so a lot of the times, people forget, founders forget that founder-led sales, you are selling your conviction. You know, the tool is not necessarily the vehicle. I mean, yes, it is part of it, but you are ultimately the biggest value prop and selling point in the initial days. Eventually, the company becomes the value point. So that's my take.
KP, one thing that I hear all the time right now is people are freaked out over AI taking over their jobs and replacing them. Tell
Right.
me your thoughts on that, what you're seeing and your response.
I think a lot of that fear is misplaced. Of course, if you look at it from the CNN headlines or CNBC headlines, and there was recently a huge layoff from this company called Block, right, which owns Square and a few other internet companies. And I think there were 10,000 people. Jack Dorsey is the CEO, and then they laid off like 4,000. So it's like 40% of the company. And in his note, he talks about how like essentially the core reason was like AI efficiency gains that he believes the company is going to gain through AI. So the market overreacted, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, this is the labor market was like in panic. They're like, oh my God, this is going to happen to everybody." I think I don't believe that AI is going to take away any jobs, or like our future is going to be where we're fighting for limited resources of jobs. I think we are in a unique disruption period, or a rearrangement period, which happens every 2 decades or so, when there's a major technological breakthrough and revolution. In the 90s, right, where the internet was taken off finally in the dot-com era, during the peak dot-com boom, everybody were worried, oh, what's going to happen to pet supply companies, right? Pets.com, was taken off, and what's going to happen to all the retailers when Amazon.com is taken off. And but you notice like how the jobs have shifted, right? Now Amazon's probably has more than 100,000, drivers and logistics people and admin and all these other jobs that have emerged because Amazon succeeded. And maybe, a generation ago, most of these people were probably in a retail store, right? As sales agents or as, back office, whatever. I ultimately think a revolution usually creates an opportunity for the labor market to upskill and keep up with what's new and what matters in the next 30, 40 years, right? And so, like, if you remember, like when the computers came out, like, Steve Jobs' early days, Macintosh, people were like, oh, what's going to happen to all the typists? Because people used to learn, or stenographers, all these, like, people used to, like, secretaries, right? They would learn how to type in a certain way, and what's going to happen to them? And then suddenly now, right, with computers, there's all kinds of new jobs. Now people can do graphic design on computers. That's one of the things Steve Jobs was talking about, where suddenly now if you have an Apple Mac, now you can use the Mac and design T-shirts, right? Maybe the same person who was, typing notes is now crunching notes or crunching, spreadsheets on Excel or the Office, whatever, on the computer. So I think our as the tools emerge, which is inevitable, every 30, 40 years, human beings, we develop a new set of tools. Actually, that happens every day, but for a major leap like AI that's happening, we're going to get a new toolkit, and that means we're going to have to adapt and learn, just like how we all learned how to drive an EV, right? 50 years ago, nobody knew how to drive a Tesla because there was no Tesla. But
Mhm.
now everyone's driving a Tesla. We learned, figured out how to use it. We now know how to use the, GPS inside Tesla, right? We know how to put in the punch in, like, we're going to go here. Give me the optimal route. Again, 50 years ago, there was nobody who was doing that. So technology to me is the ultimate enabler and empowering force for society when used the right way, right? So I have a very healthy, sort of a positive sum mindset. In my view, obviously, that's why I work in tech. I think it is going to create more jobs than we can even imagine right now. That at this point we're unable to imagine because our lens is kind of is biased based on the past, right? So we're looking at, oh, all these jobs that are going to get eliminated because of AI. Oh, look at all these copywriters that are going to go away because ChatGPT and Claude can write better copy. But the same people can retrain themselves in an AI forward way and go become a vibe coder, right? Go, do something with AI native workflows, or even start your own companies and become founders, right? This is the
I think
greatest
there's
time ever
so much, like
to
if
do it.
and I love what you're saying. And one thing that I can put into context that I lived through and experienced because I'm old as dirt is we used to use something called Yellow Pages, which
Yeah.
KP, you probably have no idea what those even are. But we used
Yeah.
to have something called a telephone that
Yeah.
plugged into a
Like
wall.
a
Yeah,
rotary phone and, yeah, plugged in the
yes.
wall.
And so I remember my very first business, this was a long time ago, we lived and died by the Yellow Pages. And
Wow.
then Google AdWords came out, and I was one of the early adopters of that.
Wow.
And that's when our business took off and
Yeah.
we beat all of our competitors and we were able to sell that business for a much higher return. And so what my point is look for those opportunities. Be one of those early adopters, right?
Yeah.
So, learn about AI.
Yeah.
So there's that part of it. The other part of it is soft skills aren't going away.
No.
AI can't replace that. So if you're
Yeah.
in sales, which is that's what this whole interview
Right.
series is about, is
Right.
revenue and sales, hone your skill.
Yeah.
Stay ahead of the curve. Learn what's working and what's not working. Learn how to use AI to improve your skills, whether it's practicing, whether it's using it for tech advances, whatever it may be. But right now is a great opportunity to leap ahead.
Yes. 100%.
Yeah,
Use the technology to your advantage, right? And you become a 10x powerful sales rep or sales leader, or a CEO or a founder because of AI, right? I think that 100%, that's the mindset to embrace. Don't be a spectator, be a participant.
100%. KP, you're always throwing new tools at me and new ideas and these crazy Claude code type of things that I've never even heard of. How do we keep from getting overwhelmed by all these tools and knowing where we should be concentrating on and how to dive into those?
Um, I- First of all, we're in this sort of historic times right now where it's the closest equivalent I can think of again is it's like the 1990s, right? When there was an explosion of websites. Every business had a website, right? And they were trying to, like, become internet native. They were trying to bring all these offline businesses, online for the first time in the dot com. And so there's sort of a sudden spike in the 90s, then eventually kind of, tapered off and became a new normal. And we kind of learned to live with that without getting like not, I don't know of any one human being who kept up with every single website that was launched in 90s, right? But I'm sure it must have felt pretty overwhelming given like, oh my gosh, everyone's launching, some version of a website and how do I? So we're seeing some version of a repeat of that, in my view, right now because of the fact that the last 2, 3 years have been historical in terms of innovation with AI. We're seeing a Cambrian explosion of people building new AI startups and AI tools and AI products. So Cloud Code's one of them, from Anthropic, Codex from OpenAI, ChatGPT from OpenAI. There's one called Gamma, right, for the presentations. It's an AI native tool. There's so many, and I'm like barely keeping up myself, but I know I'm definitely on the cutting edge. I know probably like 50 tools that maybe most mainstream people haven't heard of. But that again, that's sort of a reflection of where we are in the curve, and it'll taper off. I feel like in the next 3, 4 years, we're gonna see a rebalancing, and some of these tools, will persist. Some of them will not. They may get merged. They may get acquired. I have a feeling like some like Perplexity may get acquired, because Gemini came out. Perplexity came out because Gemini was not reacting fast enough to the market needs from Google. But Google then came out with the answer called Gemini. And so there might be some mergers and acquisitions and so on. There will be some rebalancing out in the next 3, 4 years. However, as that happens, right, our job, I believe, is to not keep up with every single launch that comes out, but at the same time, not closing our eyes and ears off from and being again being a spectator in this unbelievable, incredible opportunity, once in a lifetime, once in a generation opportunity to be part of AI and take advantage of AI, right? So um, uh, allow yourself to feel a little bit overwhelmed, just a little bit. Give yourself the permission to understand like it is going to be a little bit overwhelming initially, and all the great things in life, going to college. I remember my first month being in a new college was overwhelming. Like, oh my God, there's 1,000 new people. How do I remember John from, whatever, from like Raj? Like, how? They're all new faces. How? But again, that was part of life, part of growing up, And so we're all as humanity growing up to this new moment in history, which is AI is going to be part of our lives, whether we like it or not. It's already here, first of all, and it's going to be part of our lives even more. And after AI, there's going to be robotics. So the hardware piece of AI is going to come play a role too. Everyone's going to get a personal robot. My wife's really excited for that. She's like, "Can I do dishes already?" So, um, and so my advice there, frankly, is to you know allow yourself a little bit of permission each day to explore with your hands and eyes and ears. What I mean by that is participate in the revolution or participate in the new tools that are coming out, right? So spend 15 to 20 minutes, take a tool for a spin. It could be, like I said, Gamma, which is like a Canva, like a 2.0 for AI, or it could be ChatGPT, Cloud Code. Cloud Code might be a little bit, advanced, but pick one of these tools and then kind of see how much you can push the boundaries, and you'll be blown away. There's so much power packed into these LLMs and all these other tools that are top of LLMs. Um, and be an active participant, active builder. This is also, I work at this company called Netlify, and we are in the middle of this AI revolution where we're seeing so many people who are non-developers. I'm a non-developer. I'm semi-technical. I can understand and grok some technical concepts, but I can't write code. But there's like millions of people like me out there who are suddenly now empowered because of AI to build a website, to build an app, to build something that they could have never done before. And I think this is the greatest equalizing power, right? That we can all take our ideas and bring them to the market. Now, some of them may work out and become sort of massive companies, but some of them may not, and that's okay, right? Similar to the smartphone era. If you remember before smartphones, if I needed to go to a park and take pictures with my son, I had to get a DSLR camera or hire a photographer, or I needed to know how to take a great photo and operate a machine, a specific high definition camera for a high definition action shot. Now I can take my iPhone, right? And I can just like take 20 pictures, blah, 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 blah. How many of these will make it to the frames on my walls in my house? Maybe one in 1,000, one in 500, maybe, right? But the point is not that every app you make has to be perfect. The point is not every website you make has to make you $1 million. The point is that you know how to use the smartphone. You're not the flip phone generation, in the 2026 era, right? You can't afford to do that, especially as sales leaders, as CEOs, and as founders. You need to use the smartphone. So you better get on board and
And
start
figure
taking
it
pictures as opposed to being left behind. So I think that's the way I would look at it. It is overwhelming to an extent, yes, but also, if you're approaching it with a curiosity and a sense of learning and failing. I think the other thing too, Midori, is that there's a lot of fear of failure as adults we've captured. And I have three young sons, and when I spend time with them, I'm blown away by the human urge to just be curious and to tinker and fail and fall. And we lose that somewhere in the childhood and like kind of dust it off our bodies and souls, and we're like, we think everything we touch has to be perfect and has to work on first try. But no, AI is not going to work on first try. So you got to keep trying and retain the sense of childlike curiosity, and you're going to win. You're going to have fun every day. That's the last 2 years I've been having fun every single day. And I felt, yes, overwhelmed, maybe like an hour or two in a week, but rest of the week I'm like loving it, gliding through this amazing moment in history.
Yeah, and since we're talking about founders, it seems
Yes.
like conversations about founders. One thing that I recommend for founders, because I've been a founder forever, um, is to figure out what's your biggest problem that you're having that tech may be able to solve for you.
Yes.
Then go find the tool that seems like, do some research, use ChatGPT or these other
Yes.
tools to help you do the research. And then the next step is to take 90 days and
Yeah.
really dive in and learn it, and to the point where it feels you're no longer scared of it and you understand it. And then you can start optimizing it more.
Yes.
But you don't need to learn everything at once. Find
Yes.
the one biggest challenge that you're having,
Yes.
then dive in deep.
Yes. And I mean, agreed. And I mean, for someone like me, for example, for me, note taking is a pain point. I hate taking notes. I'm so bad at it. And ops and note taking is so hard for me. Documentation is hard for me. Hence, I dove into tools like Granola, right? And Notion has the version of Notion Note Taker, and so on and so forth. And now Gemini has Gemini Note Taker too. And I think you use one of those too, one of the note taker
Well, I
tools.
use Fathom on my
Yeah,
video, which has been
Fathom
a
is awesome,
huge game changer.
right? And
Hmm.
so again, people like us, like if we don't like taking notes, AI is going to do it for us. And at the end of the meeting or a call, it gives you not only the notes but also action items, like
Hmm.
a quick summary of like here's the three things you talked about on the call. Make sure you act on them. I think again, super efficient, super productive. So you like you said, start where you feel like you have a personal frustration and expand from there, right? You don't try to boil the ocean all at once.
Keep it simple.
Yes.
KP, the go-to-market approach today is different than it was yesterday.
Yeah.
So talk to me, since you're an expert in that field, this is what you do all day long. What are you seeing?
Yeah, it's definitely evolved. I think I would say it's almost that we've seen a lot of evolution in the last few years, but I think with the rise of AI, it almost felt like a step change evolution, right? And it was almost like a before and after, like it was dramatically different. So one way I'll sort of help visualize the transformation is the new modern go-to-market function or motion should contain it. Think of it like a triangle, and it should have the three nodes that are very key. Number one is sales. Obviously, I think a lot of people, when they think of go-to-market, they usually assume it's sales, right? A lot of the teams that are part of go-to-market, they're used to be called sales. Now the fancy term is go-to-market. However, I do think that it is by it's not complete on its own. You do need the other two nodes. The second one is marketing. Generally, marketing almost sits like in a different aisle, right? And they kind of do like branding and all these like fun campaigns. And I believe they should work in tandem with sales. And almost like glean the insights that sales are picking up from the field, right? From the conversations, from the customers, from prospects, collect those insights, use that intel. They have valuable intel, whether it's like gong calls or whether it's like customer meetings or whatever. Bring that back into how it informs your marketing positioning, how it informs your value prop statements, how it informs your differentiation, right? How it informs like what do you do, what do you not do as a brand, what are your values, and all these things that. So a lot of marketing could benefit from sales, and vice versa. A lot of the sales could benefit from marketing. Like all the things that marketing is trying to do in their day to day can be fodder to bring up in a sales call, right? Did you know this about us? Did you know? And we do this at Netlify. We are very, very well aligned and closely aligned with like both sales and marketing. And I think the third piece, which is the third node, which is massively underrated and often overlooked, is community. And my role is head of community at Netlify, but I'm very cross-functional across these two orgs, which is sales and marketing. And I'm grateful for that. And I believe that is a glimpse into the future as we're seeing in the sort of AI era. Community is in the AI, right, revolution in the AI era. Anything and everything can be copied, and there's really no moats, as they're calling them, like investors like to call them moats, defensible moats, except community, except the people who give a shit about you and your brand and your team. And so, but community is such a long-term um, play, and you have to give to get. There's no hacks here. There's no shortcuts. It's classic human nature and human psychology, right? You want a bunch of people to like them first. You want a bunch of people to, root for you, root for them first, right? So ask not what the community can do for you, ask what you can do for the community, right? Like just paraphrasing the famous, quote from JFK. Um, I think, but that mindset has to come from the top. Usually, the CEO, the founders, should have that mindset and think holistically that sales, marketing, and community should work in tandem, and they become the triangle, the go-to-market triangle. That's the perspective I think the modern AI native CEO should have, because community can pick up a lot of again insights by doing either events, meetups, right, hackathons, or it could even just be show and tells. We do a lot of these like show and tell. What have you built? Show me a cool workflow you discovered this week. And there's not really a big promotion going on about any brand. It's just learning and giving and sharing. However, in that relaxed environment, you collect a lot of intel. And people also associate you with good times, right? They like, oh, this is a great place. I want to be here. I want to learn something here, right? And if you notice some of the iconic brands like Apple and Nike, people who belong in their user base, they feel like they're part of a community. It's much larger than the product you buy, right?
Mhm.
And that's very intentional. And I think if you take from those brands into the modern AI era, where anyone and everyone can make a launch video, right? Anyone and everyone can make a landing page in like one day with AI. Then same thing with copywriting. Same thing with sales playbooks. And you like ChatGPT can write a better sales script than you and I can, in some days, right? So then what makes you stand out, right? In this world of AI slop, what makes a brand stand out is how human and how community centric the brand is. Do you feel like they're creating a space that is welcoming and is fun,
Yeah.
is in some way helping you learn something, keep up with something, Those are the values that I think will thrive in the go-to-market, function as we speak. And so it's not community is not you're running a community right now, right? Community is not creating a Slack workspace or a Slack channel and then saying, checking the box and saying, yeah, now we have a community, right? It requires a lot of gardening, nurturing. So, I view that as a service, and it's genuinely people can sense care. People can sense if the community managers or the heads of community, if they have a spirit of service or not. And
Mhm.
if there is no spirit of service, and if it feels transactional or spammy, or feels like you're not really rooting for the community, they check out, right? Because they can do other things. So.
And it's so critical today.
Yeah.
Like we said earlier, it's people want to connect.
Yes.
And that's such a great way for us to still do it. And you talked about, so it's not necessarily a community the traditional way that we think of where we need to have a circle channel
Yes.
or Slack or whatever it
Right.
is, but you can do events. I hear
Yes.
about dinner series all the time.
Yes.
People really get to know each other.
Yeah.
And if you can provide a
Yes.
great curated room
Yes.
where there's a lot of value and people are meeting and growing their connections
Yeah.
and their knowledge, that's a win. So how
That's the
can
one.
you do that?
So I'll lay out a couple tactical, I think we talked about strategy, but like from a tactical point of view, I'll lay out a few sort of moves in the community world that I see that, maybe other people can be inspired by, right? One example comes to mind is Cursor, which is sort of this AI native coding platform, which is very big now. The Cursor and Cloud Code are like Coke and Pepsi, right? They're like big, big giants coming into the AI coding world. Cursor does this really cool community tactic called Cursor Cafes. So they go to New York City or San Francisco or Chicago, Atlanta, somewhere, and they rent out an entire cafe, like a cool coffee shop, for 2 days or a day, and they invite any local Cursor fans and users. You don't have to pay. You don't have to have a paid account at Cursor. But if you feel like you're the kind of developer who belongs in Cursor's, community, feel free to come and co-work
Mm,
and, build your next website. You have free coffee. You have a free, I don't know, like they have pastries and bagels, whatever. But you get to see other Cursor nerds and like other fellow fans. Like it's a cool way to hang out. And they created this whole thing. Now it's like an activation campaign, and that runs across the globe. There's like London, there's Bangalore, and so on. And this work together as a motion, right, was very novel. Because people had meetups, which is 3 hours.
mhm,
You could host a meetup, sure, you had a venue, whatever. But this was like a novel tactic where they took over the whole cafe. They called it Cursor Cafe. Um, and then they had a barista on staff, and they would just, give you coffee and ask you to just have fun and code and, trade tips and learnings and whatever you had with Cursor. That's one tactical thing. So imagine what this means for you and your brand, right? What is the version of this? You do a private dinner, maybe, right? If you're in Atlanta and you know this amazing, awesome hotspot that just opened, find a way to hustle to get a room booked for one night or one evening, and give your users a chance to come hang out, right? Do it as an act of gesture, as a gesture of like kindness, or you know. And again, these are not. We talked about soft skills. These are not groundbreaking things, but they're being packaged in a modern, in a fun way that are keeping up with the times, right? People want to co-work with each other. People want to do show and tell. So at Netlify, our version of this is a lot of our developers, our audience, ICP, are builders, developers. They love to develop and build and code and with AI. But when somebody builds something really cool, as a builder, fellow builder, I know this. The next immediate thing that I want that gives me a dopamine hit is sharing. I want to just show you what I built. It's just there. I don't know why. We have this drive to, you hacked like 4 days in a night or 4 hours in 4 days in a row, and you just built something cool and you can't wait to show it. Sometimes you can't just show it to your wife, or you can't just show it to your kids and they don't get it. Who? And so we did this thing where on a weekly basis we have this show and tell. So we ask 5 or 6 members in the community, what have you shipped? And just come on stage virtually. It's literally a Zoom call. And sometimes we have a live stream, but come on stage and just show what you built. The amount of DMs I get and the social shout outs we get after a session like that, both from attendees who saw something cool, but also presenters, is insane. Free marketing, free PR, free whatever you want to call it. We don't do it for those reasons. But I'm just saying they love it because they finally have someone who cares about the odd, quirky things they built, right? And so giving a shit, about what people built is so deep in our DNA. And so we're like, why not? Why do we have to do anything mega? Why can't we just do something small like this and start there? So, this applies to all your other. So think of like what your ICP, loves to do, and then find an extension, find a container to bring that love into real world, right? So that's the way I see it. And then once they associate you as a brand that truly gets them, sales and marketing becomes so much easier
Hmm.
because belonging is the ultimate moat, right? The reason you can't take MacBooks from the hands of, Apple fans, they love their MacBooks. Like they will not swap it away with a LG, whatever. They could have the best deal at Thanksgiving, but they want the MacBook. I mean, I've been a Mac user for like 15 years now, right? You could not pay me enough to switch to a Windows now. And it's not the products, it's not the feature set, it's not the, specs. People think it's like the RAM memory, it's none of that stuff. It's because Apple. I feel like Apple cares about me. I get, there's a belonging and there's a sense of like community. Um, Especially during peak Steve Jobs era. So,
Yeah. And so my brain is going into, okay, how can we use this? Right.
yeah.
And so really thinking
Yes.
about, I love what you said. Keep it simple.
Yes.
Think of what your ICP, your ideal client really wants and needs.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
how can you showcase them and give
Yes.
them a lot of benefit
Yes.
to what it is? And then
Yes.
just start there. And it may grow, it may not, but
Yeah.
at least just start. And
Yes.
chances are you'll learn things and then you can develop from there.
100%. And the vector on which you move, that line of thinking is more important than the first step, right? The first step may be, let's say you do a show and tell, maybe it doesn't work. And then you say, all right, maybe show and tell is not the way. Maybe it's a roundtable discussion. Maybe RICP cares about vocally sharing, the learnings or whatever. Maybe then it's a roundtable. So the format, the event style should adapt to the needs of your ICP, right? However, the line of thinking, which is how do we make sure that these people feel like they belong with us?
Yeah.
And how do we understand their needs and identify what they're passionate about, what they love, and just naturally build an extension? Like we should become an extension of what they love, right? It's actually very easy. It's like literally, if you spend some time thinking about it on a whiteboard, or if you know one or two of your ICP and spend, what they care about. It's not that hard, right?
Yeah.
So when I joined Netlify, within days, I got like I was sharing with this idea with our CEO and our VP marketing, and they were like, "That's it," because it was not that hard for me to think of it, and it was not that hard for them to get it, right? Because they knew that developers at the core love to build and share, like what they built, like basically. So, I mean, there's so many, it's just about slowing down and thinking like, how do we find a way to tap into what my ICP is passionate about, right? And it could be any number of things. I mean, I could think of 20 different ideas based on the ICP that you have, right? It could, if sales reps, maybe they care about soft skills. Maybe there's a soft skill, webinar series. Like how do you teach body language? How do you teach confidence and whatever. I don't know, XYZ. It could be depending on the ICP, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's about identifying their needs and pains and loves and dislikes and then trying to solve for that.
And just talk to it. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
KP, where can we find you? You put out a wealth of information on social, so tell us the easiest way to find you.
I mean, you can go to my website to get like a holistic view at thisiskp.com and my Twitter. I'm very active on Twitter, as Midori, I'm terminally online at thisiskp underscore. And on LinkedIn, you can find me as Karthik Puvvada, my full name.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, and I look forward to what's to come.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and it was a blast, and I appreciate everyone listening.